Betrayal is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. It's not just an act of disloyalty, it's the shattering of trust, the breaking of something that was once whole. And the painful truth is that betrayal is a part of life. No one is immune to it. It comes in different forms: friends who turn their backs, family members who hurt you, co-workers who deceive you, even people in the church who fail you. It's a reality that every person will face at some point. Even Jesus, the Son of God, was not spared from betrayal. One of his own disciples, a man who walked with him, saw his miracles, and listened to his teachings, betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver. Judas sat at the same table, broke bread with him, and still, in the end, chose to hand him over to those who sought his death. Jesus knew it was coming. He even warned his disciples that one of them would betray him, but knowing it didn't make it any less painful. He still felt the sting of that rejection, the weight of that disloyalty. That's the nature of betrayal. It rarely comes from enemies. It comes from those we least expect, the ones we have let into our hearts, the ones we have trusted. If a stranger deceives you, it might hurt, but it doesn't cut as deep as when it comes from someone you love. The closer the relationship, the deeper the wound. Some people carry the scars of betrayal for years. A friend who spread lies about them, a spouse who broke their vows, a business partner who took advantage of their trust, a church leader who let them down. These wounds don't heal overnight. They shake the foundation of how we see people, how we trust, how we love. Some people, after being betrayed, build walls around their hearts, determined never to be hurt again. Others carry bitterness, allowing the betrayal to define them, to shape their future. But here's the truth. Betrayal has been happening since the beginning of time. Look at Joseph. His own brothers, the people who should have stood by him, protected him, and supported him, threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. Can you imagine the pain he must have felt? The people he grew up with, the ones who were supposed to love him, treated him like nothing. And it wasn't just one act of betrayal. He was later falsely accused, thrown into prison, and forgotten. But even in all of that, God was with him. David, a man after God's own heart, experienced betrayal too. His own son Absalom turned against him and tried to take his throne. His trusted counselor Ahithophel sided with the enemy. The pain of that kind of betrayal is unimaginable. When your own flesh and blood, your own friends turn against you. Suzandri, betrayal is woven into the human experience. It's the result of a fallen world, a world where sin corrupts hearts and leads people to act out of selfishness, greed, and pride. No one can escape it. But here's what you must remember. While people may betray you, God never will. There will be times when you question why it happened. You'll replay the moments in your mind, wondering what you could have done differently, trying to make sense of it. But sometimes there is no explanation that will satisfy the pain. The only thing that can truly bring healing is turning to the one who understands betrayal more than anyone else. Betrayal is a part of life, but it does not have to define your life. Some of the greatest leaders, the strongest believers, the most faithful servants of God have faced it and overcome it. It is not the betrayal itself that determines your future. It is your response to it. Will you allow it to make you bitter, or will you allow God to use it for something greater? God sees everything. There is nothing hidden from his sight, nothing beyond his understanding, nothing that escapes his knowledge. He sees the pain you carry, the burdens you hide from the world, the silent tears you cry when no one is around. He sees the betrayal, the injustice, the wrongs done against you. When people deceive you, when they take advantage of your kindness, when they turn their backs on you without reason, God sees it all. Even when it feels like no one else notices. When it seems like those who hurt you are getting away with it, you must remember that nothing is truly hidden from God. The Bible tells us that His eyes run to and fro throughout the whole earth. There is no secret that can be kept from Him, no action that goes unnoticed. He sees not only what people do, but also the motives behind their actions. While people may put on a false front, pretending to be kind while harboring deceit in their hearts, God sees beyond appearances. He knows their true intentions. You may have been blindsided by betrayal, caught off guard by the dishonesty of those you trusted, but God was never surprised. He knew it before it even happened. When you feel like crying out for justice, when you wonder why God hasn't stepped in yet, remember that His timing is perfect. He is not indifferent to your suffering. He is not ignoring your pain. He is a righteous judge, and He will deal with every injustice in His own time. The Bible says, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap." No one escapes the consequences of their actions. People may deceive others for a time, but they cannot deceive God. Every wrong will be accounted for. Every betrayal, every lie, every act of harm, God sees, and He will deal with it accordingly. There are times when it feels like evil is winning. You see people who have done wrong prospering, moving forward as if nothing ever happened. It can be frustrating. You may ask, "Lord, do you not see what they've done? Do you not care?" But God is not blind to their actions. He is patient, giving people time to repent, time to turn from their ways. But if they do not, judgment will come. At the same time, just as God sees the wrong done against you, He also sees your heart. He sees how you respond, how you choose to handle the pain. He sees when you hold on to bitterness, when you struggle to forgive. He sees when you're tempted to take revenge. But He also sees when you surrender it to Him, when you choose to trust Him instead of taking matters into your own hands. He sees your faithfulness, your obedience, your willingness to trust even when you don't understand. God sees the injustice, but He also sees the restoration that is coming. He knows how to turn every betrayal into a blessing, every wound into a testimony. You may not see it yet, but He is working behind the scenes. What the enemy meant for evil, God is already turning for good. No pain is wasted in His hand. No suffering goes unnoticed. He is watching, He is working, and in His perfect time, He will make all things right. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. That is a truth that many struggle with, especially when they have been deeply wronged. When someone betrays you, when they lie about you, when they hurt you in ways that feel unbearable, the natural instinct is to fight back, to make them feel the pain they caused you. There is something in human nature that cries out for justice, for fairness, for the wrong to be made right. But the Bible makes it clear, vengeance is not ours to take, it is the Lord's. God does not call us to ignore injustice, nor does He expect us to pretend that evil is not real. He sees every wrong, every deception, every betrayal. He knows the weight of the pain you carry, and He does not dismiss it. But He also commands His people not to take revenge into their own hands. When we try to handle justice on our own, we step into a place that belongs to God alone. He is the perfect judge. He sees what we cannot see. He understands motives, hearts, and hidden actions that we may never know about. His justice is not just based on human emotions, it is based on absolute truth. Taking revenge may feel satisfying in the moment, but it never brings true peace. It never heals the wound. It only continues the cycle of pain, anger, and destruction. When you try to take matters into your own hands, you are operating in your limited understanding. You are reacting out of hurt, out of frustration, out of the desire to make things right in your own way. But God calls you to trust Him instead. In the Bible, David had every reason to seek revenge against Saul. Saul had turned against him, hunted him down, tried to take his life multiple times. David had opportunities to strike back to end Saul's pursuit of him, but he refused. He knew that Saul was in God's hands, and he would not take vengeance for himself. He trusted that God would deal with Saul in His own way and in His own time. And in the end, God did. Saul's downfall came not by David's hands, but by the judgment of the Lord. It takes great faith to step back and say, God, I trust you to handle this. It requires surrender, a release of control, a willingness to believe that God will deal with every wrong, even if you don't see it immediately. The world teaches that strength is in fighting back, in making people pay for what they've done. But real strength is found in obedience to God, in trusting Him when every part of you wants to act out in anger. God's vengeance is not like human vengeance. It is not driven by rage or by a desire to see people suffer. His justice is perfect. He repays according to His wisdom, not according to human emotions. And sometimes His vengeance comes in the form of conviction, leading a person to repentance. Other times, it comes in judgment, allowing them to face the consequences of their actions. Either way, it is always right. When you surrender vengeance to the Lord, you free yourself from the weight of bitterness. You stop carrying the burden of trying to make things right on your own. You step into a place of peace, knowing that God will do what is just. He has not forgotten what happened. He has not overlooked the pain. He is not ignoring the wrong. He is simply asking you to trust Him, to let go, and to believe that His justice will prevail in His perfect time. God will turn betrayal into a blessing. At the moment of betrayal, it may not seem possible. The pain is too fresh, the wound too deep. You replay the conversations, the moments you trusted, the ways you gave your heart, and now all of it feels like it was for nothing. You wonder how someone you cared for could turn against you, how someone you helped could be the very person to hurt you. Betrayal shakes your foundation, making you question not just the person who hurt you, but sometimes even yourself. But what you cannot see in that moment of pain is what God is doing behind the scenes. He is not only aware of the betrayal, He has already planned how to use it for your good. What was meant to destroy you, God will use to strengthen you. What was meant to bring you down, God will use to lift you up. The betrayal that broke you today will be the testimony that blesses you tomorrow. Joseph's life is one of the greatest examples of this truth. His own brothers, the ones he should have been able to trust the most, turned on him out of jealousy. They stripped him of his coat, threw him into a pit, and sold him into slavery. To them, it was the end of Joseph's dreams. To Joseph, it must have felt like God had abandoned him, but in reality, it was the beginning of something greater. Had Joseph never been betrayed, he never would have been sold to Egypt. Had he never been falsely accused, he never would have been thrown into prison. Had he never been in prison, he never would have met the cupbearer. Had he never met the cupbearer, he never would have been introduced to Pharaoh. And had he never stood before Pharaoh, he never would have been placed in a position to save an entire nation, including the very brothers who betrayed him. What his brothers meant for evil, God turned for good. But the key to Joseph's story is this: he did not let bitterness consume him. He did not allow betrayal to harden his heart. He kept his faith in God even when he did not understand. And in the end, when he stood before his brothers once again, he did not seek revenge. He recognized that God had been working all along. God works the same way in your life. You may not see it now, but there is purpose in the pain. The people who walked away, the ones who abandoned you, the ones who hurt you deeply, they may have meant it for harm, but God is going to use it to bring you to a greater place. Betrayal has a way of pushing you toward your destiny. Sometimes the people who leave you were never meant to stay. Sometimes the rejection you experience is God's way of redirecting you. If Joseph's brothers had never betrayed him, he would have remained in his father's house, never stepping into the position God had prepared for him. What looked like the worst moment of his life was actually the moment God set him on the path to his calling. There are things in your life that will only come to pass because of the betrayal you experienced. There are doors that will open because of the pain that pushed you forward. God is not just healing your wounds, He is using them. The very thing that was meant to break you will become the thing that blesses you. What the enemy intended for evil, God is turning for your good. Forgiveness sets you free. It is one of the hardest things to do, yet one of the most powerful choices you can make. When someone wrongs you, when they betray your trust, when they speak lies about you or wound you deeply, the pain does not simply disappear, it lingers, settling into your heart like a weight that refuses to lift. You replay the situation over and over in your mind, thinking about what they did, what you should have said, what you wish would happen to them in return. Anger rises, resentment takes root, and before you realize it, you are carrying a burden far heavier than the original hurt itself. Holding on to unforgiveness feels justified. The pain was real. The betrayal was real. The injustice of it all makes you want to see them suffer the way you have suffered. You think that by refusing to forgive, you are holding them accountable, making sure they do not escape the consequences of their actions. But what you do not realize is that unforgiveness does not imprison them, it imprisons you. The person who hurt you may not even be thinking about you anymore. They may have moved on, continuing with their life as if nothing ever happened, while you are still trapped in the past, still bound by the chains of what they did. Bitterness poisons the soul. It changes the way you see the world, the way you trust others, the way you experience joy. It seeps into every area of your life, stealing your peace, robbing you of the fullness of what God has for you. And yet so many people choose to hold on to it because they think forgiving means excusing what was done. But forgiveness is not about saying what they did was right. It is not about pretending the hurt did not happen. It is not about trusting them again or allowing them back into your life. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the prison of resentment. It is about choosing freedom over bitterness. Jesus spoke about forgiveness more than once because he knew how deeply it affects the heart. He knew that an unforgiving spirit blocks the blessings of God. When he taught his disciples how to pray, he included these words: "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." He made it clear, if we want to receive God's forgiveness, we must also be willing to extend forgiveness to others. Not because they deserve it, but because we have been forgiven much ourselves. Think about the servant in the parable Jesus told, the one who owed a great debt to his master. His debt was so large that he could never repay it. Yet the master forgave him completely. But instead of showing that same mercy to someone who owed him a much smaller debt, the servant refused to forgive and had the man thrown into prison. When the master heard about it, he was angry and handed the servant over to be punished. That story is a warning. Unforgiveness is not just about our relationship with others. It affects our relationship with God. When we refuse to forgive, we close our hearts to the mercy of God. We hold on to anger, but anger does not heal. We hold on to resentment, but resentment does not bring justice. It only keeps us in bondage, replaying the past over and over, while God is calling us to move forward. Joseph had every reason to be bitter. His own brothers sold him into slavery. They took his freedom, destroyed his future, and left him for dead. He spent years suffering for something he did not do. But when he finally had the power to take revenge, when his brothers stood before him, helpless and in need, he chose something greater. He forgave. And in that moment, he was free. Free from the pain of the past, free from the weight of resentment, free to step fully into the purpose God had for his life. Forgiveness is not easy. It is not a one-time decision, but a daily choice to release the hurt into God's hands. It is trusting that he sees the wrong, that he will bring justice in his time, and that you do not have to carry the burden of making things right on your own. It is letting go, not for their sake, but for yours. Because as long as you hold on to unforgiveness, you are tied to the pain of the past. But when you forgive, you step into the freedom and healing that only God can give. God is your ultimate defender. In a world where people betray, lie, and plot against you, it is easy to feel alone. You may have trusted someone only to have them turn against you. You may have done the right thing only to be falsely accused. You may have given your best only to be overlooked, mistreated, or cast aside. In moments like these, when it feels like no one is standing up for you, when it seems like the world is against you, you must remember that God is your defense. He sees what was done in secret. He knows the truth, and he will fight for you in ways you cannot even imagine. People will fail you. Even those closest to you may disappoint you. There will be times when you are unfairly judged, wrongly accused, or treated unjustly. The temptation in those moments is to take matters into your own hands, to defend yourself, to fight back, to set the record straight by any means necessary. But the Bible reminds us over and over that the battle is not ours to fight. It belongs to the Lord. When you try to defend yourself in your own strength, you may win a temporary victory. But when you let God be your defender, he brings justice in his perfect time and his perfect way. Look at the life of David. Before he was king, he was an innocent man pursued by Saul, who sought to destroy him out of jealousy. David had done nothing wrong. He had only been faithful, yet Saul chased him down like an enemy. David had opportunities to strike back, to take revenge, to put an end to his suffering, but he refused. He understood that his defense was not in his own hands, it was in God's. And in the end, it was God who brought justice. David did not have to lift a finger to destroy Saul. God handled it in his own way. You may be facing a battle right now. Someone may be spreading lies about you. Someone may be working behind the scenes to bring you down. Someone may have taken what was rightfully yours, leaving you feeling helpless, but you are not helpless. The same God who defended David is the same God who fights for you. He is the one who exposes lies, who brings hidden things to light, who lifts up the righteous and brings down the wicked. God's defense does not always come the way we expect it. Sometimes we want instant justice. We want to see those who hurt us pay for what they did. But God works in his own time. His justice is not driven by human anger, but by divine wisdom. He sees beyond the moment, beyond what you can understand. He knows the right time, the right way, and the right outcome. And when he steps in, there is no force in heaven or on earth that can stand against him. When the Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, they felt helpless. There was no way out. It seemed like their enemies would win. But God was their defender. Moses told the people, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And in that moment, God did what no man could do. He split the sea, made a way where there was no way, and completely destroyed the enemy that had pursued them. You do not have to fight every battle on your own. You do not have to seek revenge or prove your worth to those who have doubted you. When God is your defender, He goes ahead of you, preparing the way. He stands beside you, shielding you from harm. He goes behind you, covering your past and ensuring that no weapon formed against you will prosper. You may not see it right now, but He is working. He is moving pieces into place. He is setting things right. And when the time comes, His justice will be undeniable. Stay faithful and God will restore you. Life is full of seasons, seasons of joy, seasons of trials, seasons of loss, and seasons of waiting. There are moments when everything seems to be falling into place, and then there are moments when everything seems to be falling apart. It is in those difficult moments that your faith is truly tested. When you lose what you thought you could never live without, when people turn their backs on you, when the prayers you have prayed for years seem unanswered, the temptation is to give up, to walk away, to believe that God has forgotten you. But He has not forgotten. He sees, He knows, and He is working. The key is to stay faithful even when you do not understand, because God is a God of restoration. Restoration does not always come in the way you expect. Sometimes God restores what was lost, bringing back what was taken from you. Other times He restores by giving you something even greater, something you never could have imagined. But in every case, His restoration is perfect. It is not just about giving back what was lost, but about healing the broken places, strengthening what was once weak, and bringing you into a place of greater blessing than before. Job understood what it meant to suffer loss. He lost everything: his wealth, his health, his children, his reputation. People looked at him and assumed that God had abandoned him. Even his own wife told him to curse God and die. But Job remained faithful. He did not understand why he was suffering. He had questions, deep questions, but he never turned his back on God, and in the end, God restored him. But the restoration was not just about getting back what was lost. Job came out of his trial with a deeper faith, a greater understanding of who God is, and a testimony that would encourage generations to come. Staying faithful does not mean you will not feel pain. It does not mean you will not have moments of doubt or frustration. It means that you hold on to God's promises, even when your circumstances seem to contradict them. It means that you keep doing what is right, even when everything in you wants to give up, because God is watching. He sees every tear, every sacrifice, every prayer spoken in the quiet moments when no one else is listening. And He will not let your faithfulness go unrewarded. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. He had every reason to believe that his dreams would never come to pass, but he remained faithful. He served with integrity, even in a foreign land, even in a prison cell. And at the right time, God lifted him up. He did not just restore Joseph to his former life, He elevated him to a position far greater than anything Joseph could have imagined. God's restoration is always greater than what was lost. When the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, God comes to give life and to give it abundantly. The years that seemed wasted, the time that felt stolen, the opportunities that appeared lost, God knows how to restore them. He can open doors that no man can shut. He can bring new life to what seemed dead. He can take what was meant for evil and turn it into something good. The key is to not give up in the middle of the process. The enemy wants you to believe that your situation is hopeless, that nothing will ever change, that you will never recover. But God's word is full of promises for those who remain faithful. He promises to renew your strength, to restore what was broken, to bring beauty from ashes. You may not see it today, but if you keep trusting, if you keep walking forward, if you refuse to let go of His promises, you will see His faithfulness. He will restore, and when He does, it will be more than you ever expected. No matter what you have lost, no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how long the season of suffering, God is still in control. He is your defender, your healer, and your restorer. When people turn against you, when injustice seems to prevail, when the weight of life feels unbearable, stay faithful. Do not allow bitterness to take root. Do not let unforgiveness imprison your heart. And do not give in to the lie that God has abandoned you. He sees every tear, every struggle, every silent prayer. He is working behind the scenes, even when you cannot see it. Betrayal, loss, and hardship are not the end of your story. The pain you have endured is not wasted. God specializes in turning what was meant for evil into something good. He takes what was broken and makes it whole again. He lifts up those who remain faithful and restores what was lost in ways beyond human understanding. Your part is to trust Him, to keep walking forward, to hold on to His promises even when nothing makes sense. Forgiveness sets you free, faithfulness positions you for blessing, and trusting God as your defender allows Him to fight battles you were never meant to fight. If you leave the past in His hands, He will take care of your future. If you surrender the pain, He will replace it with peace. And when the time is right, He will restore you, not just to where you were before, but to a place even greater than you imagined.